Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, my page once again. So this topic, is taking a really, I don't know, it's taking a lot out of me, I think. It's pulling a lot out of me. So I want to say taking, it's pulling a lot out of me. And I don't know what is it. What is it about Stephon Clark death, wrongful death, and people's response to, or even their reaction to, because we've seen some responses and we've seen some reactions to this police killing that is like, it's pulling on me, you guys. It's really getting me to really think critically about hate, self-hate, to think critically about Black identity development and implicit racial bias and how all of this stuff applies to Stephon Clark's case. I have a really special treat for you guys, so please stay tuned because I'm actually at my school right now. I'm inside a classroom. Hopefully I don't get interrupted. So let's cross our fingers and hope that we can get through this. But I am going to talk to you guys in some depth about this whole idea, this whole topic, this concept of self-hatred. And part of it comes as a request from one of my followers who said that he felt I was kind of glazing over self-hate and I really didn't touch as deep as I guess he wanted me to with regard to talking about self-hatred within Stephon Clark. So here I am. I think that I pretty much tackled the topic itself, of what's going on with Stephon Clark and this whole thing about women deciding, Black women specifically deciding not to support Stephon Clark, with regard to him being wrongfully killed by the police on March 18th. And so, like I said, this topic has really been pulling some things out of me and getting me to think really critically about it. And not just the incident of what happened, but, people's reaction to it. And I know a lot of you guys probably would prefer to look at self-hatred as a choice, that we all have complete control over, right? It's just as simple as choosing to love yourself, choosing to love the Black race, choosing to love Black women. I think the way in which people have reacted to this outcome here that we see with another African American man being killed by police, people are assuming that he had full control over himself and his decision to date outside of his race, right? It was completely his decision, isolated from any other type of influence. Essentially saying that was all him. His decision to hate the Black race, to separate himself from the Black race in an attempt, in a way, I guess, by choosing to marry an Asian woman. People are looking at that as if it was a choice that was completely within his hands, right? That's one way of looking at it. But I know, and I know many of you guys know, that when we look at behavior isn't just a factor of choice. It goes much deeper than that. Even the choices that we make are predicated upon certain things that we may or may not be always aware of. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys the treat that I put together for you guys to help explain my perspective on this. And it's not just my perspective, but it's a very helpful perspective. And let me see, can I come back a little bit so you guys can see? So what you guys are looking at is a model for understanding human behavior, and is often used in psychology and sociology, even in criminology, and trying to understand what systems are at play, what factors within certain systems, as you guys can see here, and I'm going to explain it in a little bit, how these factors within these systems can impact an individual. So you guys can see here, there is self-hate in the middle. And then outside of that, we see layers of systems. So right here where it says self-hate, that is the individual. So the individual is in the middle of this ecological system here. And it was created by Brenner. A lot of people who study psychology and sociology are very familiar with this. You guys, it may be very new to you guys because you haven't been exposed to, psychology, but this is one of the things that, this is one of the theories that a lot of psychologists espouse. So outside of the individual is the microsystem, as you guys can see. I have the arrows, the lines pointing outward so you guys can see. You guys can get a good picture to see. You guys see? So outside the individual, we have the microsystem. Within the microsystem, we have family, school, peers, and church. Then outside of the microsystem lies the exosystem. We have mass media, we have politics, we have neighbors or the neighborhood, and the industry, which the individual works. And then the macrosystem. The macrosystem, which basically encompasses the attitudes and ideologies of the dominant culture. So as you guys can see, it's a pretty kind of straightforward way of understanding human behavior and how human behavior can be impacted by a number of systems. This is just one conceptualization for understanding human behavior, you guys. This is just one conceptualization. And I don't know if you guys can quite see. It's probably better if I just do it this way because I think in live, the camera is actually flipped. So let me flip it this way. So for you guys who are saying that STEPHON Clark deserves what he got. A lot of people are saying that, women specifically are saying, Black women are saying, we're not going to stand with STEPHON Clark because you guys have fallen victim yourselves to this thing right here we call mass media, which is impacting the individual. As you guys can see, the individual sits right there in the middle. And being that the media, they have their role, they have their job. I'm going to come back to the model, but I'm going to just position the camera here. Being that the media, of course, has their role in shaping public opinion, they know the amount of influence that they have on shaping people's perspectives on what happens in the world. They know it, but they don't care. So now we have a whole slew of women, Black women, who have decided that they are going to believe what the media is saying about STEPHON Clark because the media decided they want to go and find some old Twitter post that he made with regard to his perspective on Black women. I created this video so that you guys can understand the whole concept of self-hate, to be able to understand that it happens within a certain context. And that context here is what we have here on the board. So when we think about and we look at self-hate right here, this can easily be replaced with depression. You can put low self-esteem there. You can put any mental or psychological illness right there in the center where you see self-hate. But we're talking about self-hate in this video because that seems to be the focal point of discussion. And it's interesting, I think, how the media has twisted. They have twisted the narrative to not even take into account, to really conceptualize what those tweets from Stephon Clark really mean. What are they really saying? You know, is it a reflection of his hatred towards black women? I mean, does he, when we look at, especially when we look at hate within the context of the black community, right? And we take that in the context of our greater culture, the dominant culture. You guys, when you guys were looking at the macro system, which is the broader layer of this ecological model here, we can understand how the ideas of the dominant culture can affect the individual who sits within this ecological system. Let's be clear and let's not be confused about how self-hate first originated. You know, self-hate specifically within black people. I mean, we have to ask ourselves, where did we get this hate from? Where did we get this idea that black is whack, that white is right? You guys tell me. Like I said, I did this model here so you guys, I can really break it down for you guys and you guys can see how self-hate can evolve, how it comes to be. We have the attitudes and ideologies of the dominant culture, where it originates from. And it's trickled down through the mass media. Politics, we know how big politics and the law, how the major role that politics and the law have played in shaping our lives as African Americans in this country. We know we wouldn't be able to vote had it not been certain things that happen in politics. We would not be segregated if it wasn't for the laws. You know, we have to understand the context in which behavior occurs. To just take an individual, pick an individual out of society, just handpick. Let's say we were able, because our hands were big enough, and we were able to reach down in society and handpick a person and take a look at that person to try to figure out, who is this person? How did this person come to be? A good place to start, according to this model, would be to look at this person's microsystem. Look at that person's family. You know, if they're in school, school definitely plays an important role because kids are in school how many hours a day? So we know the influence of school. And church, you guys go to church at least once a week, every single week. So we know the role of religion, you know, and then not only just looking at the role of religion, but taking it a step further to look at the images that we see in the church. The very fact, people say color doesn't matter, but the very fact that Jesus is a white man, trust and believe it or not, it does have a significant role in how we see ourselves with respect to this right here, the dominant culture. Because there is a such thing as generalization where people, you know, we begin to make these generalizations subconsciously. It's not something that we cognitively are aware of, but subconsciously, that's just how the mind works. So we see a picture of Jesus, who the church, through religion, has told us represents God. And we look at the color of Jesus' skin, and we see that it's not the color of our skin. It's not even the color that they talk about in the Bible. It's a different color. Understand that plays a role in how we see other people who resemble this image of Jesus that is hung on churches across America, that's hung on the wall within homes, in African American homes across America. People like to say it doesn't matter, but trust And believe it does, you guys. Color matters. It's something that goes into our subconscious mind. Understand there's a psychology to color. That's what I'm getting at. And then we go and we take a step further and we look at the mass media. And really, this model was developed. Really, it's been a while. It's been developed, several decades ago. So it's been around for a while. And at the time this model was developed, we didn't have social media. But we can put social media right here, closer to this individual, because we know the influence that social media, which is mass media, has on an individual. We look at the messages within mass media. You guys probably haven't noticed, I don't know, because sometimes people just watch TV just to be entertained. They're not really looking for the message behind the message. They're not really looking at the subliminal messages in cartoons or in movies, just like Black Panther, you guys. There were a lot of subliminal messages within Black Panther. I think a lot of people they didn't catch on to, because they were mainly focused on the bells and whistles, the special effects that we saw. And I'm not saying it wasn't a well-created movie. They put a lot of money in it, obviously, But I think that was more of a distraction. Yes, it motivated Black people to see other Black people on the big screen and to see beautiful Black people on the big screen, as represented in a positive image. But we have to sometimes take a step and go deeper than what we see on the surface, you guys, and begin to read between the lines, begin to see how the media is shaping our minds. People underestimate the influence of the media, but it plays a major role in how we think, how we act. A lot of times y'all don't care. If it's not entertaining, if it's not funny, nobody wants to pay attention to it. So I'm sure this video, it's not going to go viral. People aren't going to really share this video, but for the ones who do watch this video, for the ones who do take the time out to focus on what's really important, looking at this issue from a very serious standpoint and not getting sucked up into the hype, because it's so easy to pick up our cell phones and get caught up in what everybody else is saying, get caught up in the narrative of everybody else, a popular narrative, right? And there we go. There we have it. Like I said, even people have been influenced as individuals by the mass media. You guys have been influenced by what you've seen on CNN and Fox, what they're telling you guys with regard to who STEPHON Clark really is. And the mistake that they have made, they only focus on this, and they didn't even frame it in terms of self-hate. They just said it was hate. They took away the self, forgetting the anger and the hatred that he has is really towards himself, but they just said hate. This is what they said. Hate women. And not even that. Let me be more specific. Let me be a little bit more specific on what they said. This is what the media said. I'm going to show you guys really quickly how the media spins stuff. They said hates Black women. So they read some of his posts, and in my previous video on, does STEPHON Clark's life matter? You guys can go back and watch that. I talked about some of his tweets that he posted. One of them, if I can recall, was he said, dark bitches, I can't remember exact frame that he put it, but he said he was pretty much saying dark women bring dark days, or some sort of effect. Dark bitches or black bitches bring dark days, right? That's what he said. So we know that is self-hate. Self-hate. We have to understand the difference between self-hate. There is a difference. We have self-hate, and then we have hate. Now, if you guys were to ask me what those messages were stemming from and what they really are, I would say self-hate. Why is it self-hate? It's self-hate because he's black himself. He's not saying these negative things. So the few things that I did find that he said, and you guys can Google it yourself, but people are, I think, exaggerating. The media is really exaggerating this thing and running with it to say that this man, he just like terrorizing black women. He's, was attacking black women and, pouring out all these hate messages. And I'm like, I found two. I found two from him and one from his wife. The other thing that he said was he don't want to touch anything black except for an Xbox. That again is self-hate because we know, he's a black man, right? So for him to say those words, we know that's a reflection of hatred towards oneself. You guys have to understand the difference between hate towards other people and hate towards oneself. So now it's not to say that when you guys see those posts and when you hear African American men projecting their self-hate onto black women, yes, that is hatred. But it's more, you guys have to understand the context. It's more about hatred towards oneself because he's talking about black identity. He hates identifying himself as black. That's why he chose to date a white or Asian woman. You guys have to understand the difference. And then not only that, but like I said, the media only stopped here. So they'll go and get his Twitter post and say and make this conclusion. He hates black women. But you know what the media will never do? They don't tell you the full story. They don't pull it back. And I always like to pull it back so you guys can see the big picture. This is a big picture, you guys. So you have to ask yourself, where does this hate come from? He projected self-hate, you guys see, onto black women. That's a projection. So you have to understand it's not just hate in and of itself, but it's a projection, meaning that projection, that hate comes from somewhere. It comes from somewhere. Oh, no. Marker. So this hate right here, hates black women. This hate is self-hate. It's within. It's hate that he has within himself towards himself because he is black and is projected onto women. But my point in making this video is to, like I say, pull back the picture. Open up that lens and see, you guys can see a fuller, more accurate picture of what's going on. See how this hate for oneself and how it ends up being projected onto black women, because you can't just keep those negative emotions within. You have to let them out. And how that hate is influenced by all of these systems was concocted based on all of those symptoms. It's not that this man was born with hate. It's not that he was born with hate. So somewhere down the line, which is what we do, you guys, in my line of work, we don't just look at an individual and say, okay, what are your symptoms? Tell us your symptoms. Okay, you feel sad, you feel lonely, and just throw a label of depression, or in this case, just go and dig up his Twitter post and say, oh, he hates black women. It don't work that way. We have to do a full psychological evaluation, which means we have to go and collect some history, not just on the individual, but on the context in which the individual lives. So what do we look at? School, you can put work here for people who work. Just leave the caps off. So you can put work. So that's school or work. If a person is working, you have to look at how they are influenced by family, peers, the church. You guys understand the role of the church. It is so important in how we perceive ourselves. And yes, the church has some positive benefits, but a lot of it is reinforcing these negative images, these negative ideologies of the dominant culture that we see on the outside layer. And yes, these systems communicate. So it's not that they stand alone and they occur in a vacuum. No. When we see the microsystem, the exosystem, the microsystem, they talk to each other. The different factors within these systems communicate with each other. They influence each other. So politics can influence church. Mass media can influence family, and vice versa. The attitudes and ideologies of the dominant culture can influence mass media and politics, which then impacts the individual. But you guys have to understand that all of this happens within a certain context. We're not saying that just because it happens within a context that you're excusing his behavior, that you're saying that it's okay. So I want to make it clear, because a lot of times people think that, oh, well, just because we've conceptualized this thing and we see that it happens within a context that somehow we excuse it. No. At the end of the day, I think we all as African Americans need to look within ourselves to see how much self-hate every single one of us has. Because like I said, we want to point the fingers at STEPHON Clark because the media has brought it to our minds, to the forefront. But in doing so, with the media bringing up this issue of self-hate, they didn't even say self-hate, but I'm labeling it self-hate. They call it hatred towards black women. I'm just like, stop it. The media has a way of twisting shit. Like I say, they're not going to tell you guys the full picture. They're not going to talk about the role of politics and a long history of segregation, a long history of black codes, a long history of racially biased laws that put black people at the bottom. We're not going to talk about that because why? It's much easier to look at the individual. It's much easier, as they say, to change an individual than to change these systems that impact the individual. I mean, look how hard it is to go and create laws. You know, people have to protest and lobby to create laws to bring about change. At one point, black people could not vote. At one point, black people could not eat at the same restaurants as white people. At one point, black people had to be in at a certain time. I mean, black people have gone through so much, and we like to say, oh, that's the past. Let the past be the past. It's not like that anymore. Oh, no. There's still residual effects because it's still perpetuated. We have to understand that racism has evolved. It's not that it's been taken away and we no longer have racism. It's just evolved into a more sophisticated system. That's what we're dealing with. And I think it's very unfair, it's very unfortunate that the media is not going to talk about all of these different layers that could have shaped this self-hatred that he has. They're not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you that they are in part responsible for his self-hate. What they do is say, oh no, that's all on him. He hates black women, or he has a strong negative feeling, because we have to look at it this way, you guys, and be very careful when it comes to using the word hate. To put it out there to say that this man hated black women, I don't know if I would take it that far. I would say that yes, he has some issues with accepting his own identity and finding a place in society. And I think, again, like I said at the beginning of this video, I think I'm so drawn to this topic, to this case, to this news story, because my research is predicated on this stuff, you guys. Like, this is the meat of my research that I'm working on right now in my PhD program, looking at black identity development and implicit racial bias. And for the black people who are just so strong, black power this and black power that, I wish I could meet with you guys one-on-one and give you guys some measures, some psychological measures. I think sometimes people look at psychology and they think that we only look at mental illness, in the traditional sense. So looking at depression and schizophrenia and anxiety. But there are so many different aspects of psychology, including black identity, cultural identity, how much or how less a person who is considered to be a minority identifies themselves with their ethnic group or with the dominant culture. So understand, like, there are certain stages according to, I'm going to have to write this down because I really want you guys to get this. So we have Cross. This is a researcher. Name of a researcher. Black identity development model. This is a model for understanding the stages in which black people go through within the context of the dominant culture here. There are certain stages, according to Cross, that blacks go through. I don't really have time to go through all those stages. My research covers that. So if you guys want to learn more about that in more detail, you guys go to my website at behappy.org. It's spelled BIHAPI.org. But essentially, he's saying that black people, ethnic core, considered ethnic minority, we face a certain struggle, internal struggle within us. And finding out who we are, and who we are in terms of our ethnic identity, it changes over time. It changes over time. And so while a person can be black power and they can identify themselves very strongly to the African culture or black culture, over time, there are certain things, and these things fall within this model. And of course, I could have put examples, but I figure that I can fill in the details just by talking to you guys. But there are examples of how the mass media influences certain things that happen within mass media. I mean, you guys, all you gotta do is turn on your television and watch with a critical eye to see how does the media have a certain slant on a story. How do films have a certain slant? One prime example that we see even in filmmaking, in films, what kind of roles do black actors get in films? What kind of roles do we get? We got to be the mammy, the drug dealer. It's always roles that portray us in a negative light. And then you see white people have these positive roles. They're lawyers, they're doctors, they're CEOs, they own these companies. And it's not to say that the media hasn't changed, right? I think over time it's changing, but you still see a lot of us being portrayed in a negative light. And you see it a lot in reality television because that's where the money is, for black people who don't mind signing up, acting like coons, and putting themselves out there. that, of course, has an influence on the individual who sits within this ecological system that we see here. Trust me, it does, you guys. You don't realize, I think sometimes we think that we have so much control over who we are. We would like to believe that we have so much control over the person that we end up becoming to be. And yes, I think while we have a certain degree of control based on our choices, even our choices are influenced by the dominant culture. How we think is influenced by the dominant culture. Because you see what happens when there's resistance to the dominant culture. You guys see what has happened. How long did it take for Black people to actually feel comfortable? Even to this day, they still don't feel comfortable wearing the afro. There's a period, when Black people walking around with their fists up and with their afro pics and Black pride. But even that was a struggle, being able to declare your Black identity without shame. You get what I'm saying? Because there's these messages being poured in from the media who influences public opinion. So when you go out in society and you're trying to integrate and you try to go get a job, but then the white employer looks at you funny because you walk in there with nappy hair. You don't think that has an influence on the individual who sits within this ecological system? Of course it does. Of course it. Another example with mass media is you see a lot of successful athletes, Black athletes, who marry outside of their race. When you see Black success and it's associated with integration, so to speak, whether it comes in the form of a Black person working for a white-owned company, a successful white-owned company, or if it comes in the form of a Black person integrating in society, living in a white neighborhood, or marrying outside of their race, people absorb those messages, sending a message to America on what it means to be successful. It's communicating a message on what it means to be successful. How should one acquire success? So when you have a guy, a Black man like STEPHON Clark, who decides that his way in society is going to involve him marrying outside of his race, I'm thinking you guys are looking at this issue very narrow-mindedly by only looking at him and saying, oh, it's him, it's him. That's like looking at a depressed person and saying, oh, it's you. It's because you're lazy. You feel depressed because you're just lazy. It's something that you are doing, not taking into account all of these other factors. All these other factors that sit outside of that individual. The neighborhood. This says neighbors, but it really should say neighborhood. Same thing though. Neighborhood, that you live in, whether there's a lot of crime in that neighborhood. What is the environment of the neighborhood in which a person lives? When they go to school, what do they see when they go to school? They're in a mixed school where it's white people, predominantly white people. Then what do you expect a Black man to do? If he's surrounded by white people, what do you expect? And for the Black bougie people to say, oh, they want to point fingers at him for dating outside of his race, it's like, how are y'all any different? I'm waiting to hear, how are y'all any different? Point to me one Black person who is quote unquote 100% Black. I mean, every aspect of you is Black, and not just your person, but I'm talking about expressions of your person. You get what I'm saying? You begin to see how Black or how whitewashed people are within the Black community just based on looking at their behavior, their choices, their language, the way we talk. I mean, none of us can talk because guess what? All of us speak English. Yes, some of us may speak broken English, but the fact that we all speak English, that's an expression of being whitewashed because that is not our native language. That is not African language. So the fact that we have conformed to this dominant culture, we've been colonized, you guys. That's just one aspect in our language. The whole thing about making people feel guilty for not speaking, quote unquote, proper English. It's like the guilt shaming of America and within public school systems to force this language onto people. And yes, it serves a purpose. Don't get me wrong, but we're talking about coming to terms with who we are as a culture and fighting this fight against racism. It's a very complex thing, you guys. It's very complex. So no, your outward expression of being whitewashed may not necessarily look like STEPHON Clark's, may not be the exact words that he used on his post, but we all are guilty of it. There's this thing called microaggressions where people, Black people, and it doesn't have to be Black people, but it's people within a certain ethnic group, tend to spew out these negative hate comments towards other Black people within their own culture. And it's like little sly comments, that we sit up here and we throw it out to each other. We don't think that it's self-hate or in a form of self-hate, but it is. It's called a microaggression. Black people do it all the time. We pick at each other for the way we talk. Look at you talking ghetto. Look at your nappy head. These things that you don't think really offends a person, but it does. And you don't even realize when you say those things, what is it doing to the person who's receiving that information? You may say it in a joking manner. Look at your Black people, look at your ashy legs. Black people always ashy. These stereotypes that we created within our own culture. You don't think that it shapes the person's mind, their psychology, and who they are? Of course it does, you guys. Black people have to wrestle with a lot. Finding who you are and deciding who you're going to be is not easy. And your identity is bound to change. Who you were, like I said, 10 years ago, the Black person you were 10 years ago is not going to be the Black person that you're going to be 10 years from now or even today. It's just not. You develop, you change, and it's based on what we see, these events that are happening. You have a police killing of an innocent Black man, and then it happens repeatedly over and over and over again, and we're being exposed to this by the media repeatedly. Don't you think that's going to shape how we see ourselves? It could make us identify more strongly with our Black identity, or it could lead some people to say, you know what, I need to find something else. Maybe I need to put a perm in my hair, cut my dreads off so I can fit in. They can accept me so I don't feel like I'm a threat when I walk through a certain neighborhood. For some other people, they may feel like they got to dress a certain way. They have to go out and wear certain brands. Sorry, you guys, I don't know what happened. But they may feel they have to go out and wear certain brands just to fit in with the dominant culture. For some people, it's living in a certain neighborhood. Some people feel like they ain't reached success until they move to the white neighborhood. Some of you guys watching this video right now who want to attack STEPHON Clark, just for his adaptability to the dominant culture. That's how he found a way. He was still young, so he was still trying to find his way. But that's how he decided to find a way to fit in. Some of you guys feel like you can't have success until you move out to the suburbs and you live in a white neighborhood. You feel like, oh, you living better, you living right. How is that any better or different living in a Black neighborhood? Why don't we take that money that we have and build up our own neighborhoods? Why do we have to go to the white neighborhood to somehow feel better about ourselves. You get what I'm saying? That's an implicit racial bias right there that majority of you guys have. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about implicit racial bias that all of us have that is funneled into this thing we call self-hate, which a lot of y'all in denial. A lot of y'all claim, oh no, I don't hate myself. I love my black identity. I love, a lot of y'all women got perms in your hair. How can you say you love yourself when you got a perm in your hair? You know, you can't even grow, you can't even let your own nappy hair grow out because you hate it. Who actually loves and embraces their natural identity, how they were born? You know, but then you have society that'll tell you, oh no, it's okay to put a perm, it's okay to, because you do it in the name of fashion. And trust me, there's nothing wrong with fashion. I love it. I think it's beautiful. I don't have anything against black women who put perms in their hair, but you have to understand, to a certain extent, that is a form of self-hate. Where do we get that idea from? Y'all know over this stuff has taken place over many generations. A lot of stuff is just passed down. And you guys know the rhetoric that you've heard growing up in your households from your parents with regard to white people. You internalize that. You pass it down to your children. And in the name of integration, that's all it is. And so when you see this black man, STEPHON Clark, with an Asian woman, that's just his attempt to integrate. And you see the Twitter posts, that's just him expressing what's inside of him, the self-hate that's within him, because he is a black man. It would simply be hate if he was white. You get what I'm saying? And he's saying that about black women. That would be hatred. But no, he's a black man saying this about his own people. That's what you call self-hatred, you guys. He hates his own identity. So to push a man under, I hope you guys don't hear that background noise. Because like I said, I'm still at my school. I'm getting ready to head home. But to push a man underneath a bus, you know, to throw this man out to the lions, you know, or to throw him out in the ocean with the sharks and just say, to hell with him. We don't care about losing him. I'm like, y'all are some cruel people. That's what you call self-hate too. That's what you call self-hate. Not even realizing you putting this man out or saying you're not going to support the wrongful killing, his wrongful death, based on this right here, what the media has put into your head and who controls the media. You ain't getting this from black media. You're getting this from white people telling you this about this man, saying that he hates black women. They have changed the narrative. When really, it's not that he hates black women, he hates himself. Understand, there's a difference. And all of that self-hate is just projected out onto black women because he just can't hold it in. He cannot hold it inside of him. The same thing applies to white people, though. I know earlier I said that when white people hate black people, it's just hate. That's hate too, but that's self-hate that originates within themselves. And they project their own hate that they have for themselves onto black people. Projective identification, that's exactly what it is. You guys have to understand these concepts. Google them if you don't understand it. But that's what he's doing. You guys can go get a more in-depth understanding of some of these. Look at these concepts. Cross Black Identity Development Model. Google it so you guys can understand what I'm talking about in these different systems, these different layers that the individual lives within. No individual lives on an island by themselves. Now, if he was on an island by himself and was not shaped by family, was not shaped by his peers, church, his neighborhood, the mass media, politics being a very important one, and the attitudes of the dominant culture, who has told him that black is whack. Black is no good. You should hate yourself. This is not just an isolated thing, you guys, where you see the media want to dig up his personal history and paint him as if he was some devil and he was just a monster that hated black women. And I hate that it's very one-sided. That's a one-sided story. They don't want to show you the big picture that I just showed you guys, to look at the greater context. They're not gonna give you a full analysis of this thing. They're just gonna sit up here and say, "Oh, we found these tweets. That's who he is." Where did he get that hate from? Like I said, it's not ice. It's a lot. Y'all will be surprised how many of us black people, and not just black, because there's people from other cultures too. Other minority groups have to go through the same thing where they're struggling with who they are and having to give up parts of their identity. And sometimes it happens on a subconscious level. You ain't even aware. Think about it now. When a black woman first got her perm and she got them chemicals and her scalp was burning, you probably were too young to even think that it was an expression of self-hate. Like I said, it happens on a subconscious level. You're probably just thinking, I just want to, look nice. I just want to have straight hair, and, having afro is much harder to manage. So people go permanent, hence the name perm, so they can have straight hair and not have to comb through the nap, so to speak. Not even knowing that it was more of a subconscious decision driven by all of these things here. What's in the microsystem, exosystem, macrosystem that help shape their decision. You get what I'm saying? Help shape that particular behavior of deciding to put a perm in your hair. You guys don't want to hear this. All you want to do is just jump on the bandwagon and get all hyped up, because you see one woman, black woman, who's also demonstrating self-hate, telling the masses that black people should not support this man. She's trying to lead a so-called revolution, and you don't even understand. It's like they got you. I keep saying, y'all, this is chess, not checkers. Meaning there's a strategy to the media and what they're doing, and we wonder, how do we get to this point? How is it that, black people still don't hardly have anything? And people want to blame, it's the individual. But a lot of y'all, just because you got a little 9-to-5 job, you still can't sit up here and brag and say that you're doing better than half the white people who are your age. You get what I'm saying? Who have your experience and level of education. Because that's not true. We live in this macro system, you guys. This microcosm of many different layers that influence us. A lot of times we're just not aware of what shapes our behavior. This same model can be applied to crime. You look at what caused an individual to commit a certain crime. How are you going to interpret and understand that? You take a look at those systems, his family, his neighborhood, his peers, the attitudes of the dominant culture, to see how did this influence a person to commit a certain crime. The same thing goes with psychological dysfunctions, psychological illnesses. You can look at self-hate as an illness. Think about it. You hate yourself. How painful is that? It's like, and y'all want to go attacking this man. He's dead. It's like beating a dead horse. You get what I'm saying? How you going to beat a man who's already down? He's already down psychologically before his death. Because he doesn't appreciate blackness. It's one thing, like I said, not everybody who dates interracially hates themselves. So let's make that clear. So sometimes it's just based on personal choice. It's based on the dating pool. So looking at their options, and availability. of single people that's out there, and then they find a match. What matches their personality and their interests, not necessarily based on race. It's just based on availability of the dating pool. And then sometimes that choice to date interracially is a conscious choice made because of a lot of certain other factors that are subconscious that you may not even be aware of that's driving you to make a certain decision. You get, a lot of us have it within us. So to attack the man who's already whose psyche is already damaged. You get what I'm saying? He already has a damaged sense of self, of who he is as a black man and how he fits within his culture. And he's only expressing that using social media as a platform. And instead of women saying, oh man, we need to really address this issue here, not from a judgmental point of view to say, oh, black men, oh, we got something for y'all type of thing. That's very vindictive. But no, let's address it from more of a compassionate perspective, knowing that we too ourselves are black and that none of us are immune to being whitewashed. One of you guys watching this video might be feeling that you hate yourself right now, and a lot of it is stemming from how you've been conditioned as a black person living in a racist society. We've been taught to hate ourselves. It's a learned behavior, you guys. If you guys understand hatred, self-hate specifically, as a learned behavior, it's not something that people just, I'm just gonna hate black people. That's just, it's coming from somewhere. So that's my role, to figure out and to work with individuals on how these ideologies are shaped in a person's mind to get them to hate themselves, to uncover the layers, these many layers I just showed you guys, of how this person living within this ecological system, that you're born into. You didn't choose these layers that surround you, but you were placed within the center. And it shaped the person who you are. Because that a black person growing up in a certain context within America is going to look much different than a black person growing up in a certain context in Africa. And we wonder how they can love themselves. We look at Africans and see, well, how is it that they love them? They have this pride, African pride in who they are. And it's not whitewash. It's not based on European ideologies. But they really, love themselves. It's not to say that they are immune too, because even European culture has infiltrated many African cultures, African countries. So yes, you see them wearing perms. You see them getting the fade cream and put it on their face to make their skin lighter. What is it that makes black women feel they want to go a few shades lighter? How did black women learn that? Perhaps it's the media when they see these commercials. Who is in the commercials? How does America define what's beauty? What represents beauty? When we look at these magazines, look how they depict what's beautiful. That's why there's this whole movement going on about my black is beautiful. It's a reason for that. And even with that movement, you still have a lot of young black girls who don't think they're beautiful. You guys see these videos all the time on social media being posted where black girls are struggling with their identity, with their sense of self and self-worth. And you wonder, how can a child so young be impacted by this? Like I said, my research is predicated upon the doll test study that was done in the 1940s. And in that study, they basically found that kids as young as preschool age have negative views. Part of my study, I've replicated that study, you guys. And no, I did not videotape, which I thought, while I was doing, I was like, wow, I need to videotape this. So, because when you guys see, I mean, if only you guys can see me administer this assessment tool to determine how much racial bias these little kids have within them, and you guys see these little black beautiful babies making these negative associations with themselves, and they're saying the black doll is ugly. The white doll is like, they assigning everything positive to the white doll or the white figure and assigning everything negative to, like, how do they do that? And then when you talk to them just to check to see, okay, is that really how you feel, or are you just randomly picking stuff? It's like, no, this is not random. This is not a random selection of what they're doing, you guys. They are doing this very discriminately, you guys. There is, you can't ignore, we try to push a lot of stuff under the rug and say it don't exist. But like I say, if there are black women who have children between the ages of 4 and 5 and live in Los Angeles, just send me an email. I will meet with you and you can be a part of my study, and you as a parent, African American parent, will be able to see yourself this thing play out, and it's so amazing. Like, you're gonna be shocked. I was shocked when I first did it. I was like, oh, it's one thing to read research, read tons of research, because of course I'm studying to become a doctor, so this is part of the process. I'm exposed to a lot of research. It's one thing, like I said, when you read research, and even when you see it played out in videos, but it's another thing when you are right there and you're conducting this research and you see it for yourself, like, man, what past researchers have found is actually true. You get what I'm saying? To see these little kids having this negative bias against their own race at such a young age. It was almost make you want to. I was doing one parent. I'm going to tell you guys a story real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and end this blog because I'm tired and I'm ready to go home. But one of my participants, like, it was so shocking. I think the parent was so shocked to see, and not only shocked, but almost like she felt guilty, I think, to a certain extent, that she couldn't even withhold herself from intervening. I kept having to tell her, don't say anything. She wanted to, when the child would make a negative association with the black figure, the black person, it's like the parent was compelled to tell the child, no, don't say that, do the opposite. And I'm telling the parent, no, this is research, it's a controlled study, so you cannot intervene. But it took everything within her not to intervene, which basically, it informed her, the experience that she had and participating in my study actually informed her that, first of all, this bias exists, that she probably wasn't even aware that it existed, in her child, but it exists. And then not only that, but something needs to be done, That's the reason why I chose my research study topic. And I'm choosing to work with little kids, because if we can nip this thing in the bud young, when they're young, you get what I'm saying? We know these systems right here that you guys see are pretty strong. So yes, we have family. That's parent. You can put parents there too. Parenting. We know they have a very important role. That's why they're so close to the self, right? This is a self, the individual. They're so close right here. We know the role of parenting, right? But nowadays, come on, we know that kids spend how many hours in school? How many hours are they on their phone? They're being influenced. Then they have their peers play a very important role. So it's like the teaching that the parent gives, how significant is it going to be unless the parent is really ingraining positive messages in these kids' mind? There's no way. I think a lot of times we think that, we keep kids sheltered, right? And we know where they are every time of the day, and we're always over them like helicopter parents, telling them what to do and how to think. that is going to make them to become these outstanding people with no problems, right? But that's not the case. I mean, I feel like none of us are immune to these effects, you guys, of the dominant culture, because we live in America. That's just like if we were to go, hop on a plane and go to another country. That dominant, if you stay in that country long enough, trust and believe that dominant culture, the beliefs, the practices of that dominant culture are going to influence you. That's just like if you're around a certain culture for a period of time, you're going to start picking up on their accent. That's just the way human beings are. We're very malleable. We can be easily molded and shaped. And even though we can reach the age of adulthood where a lot of us think that we're stuck in our ways, the brain is very plastic. It has plasticity in the sense that it can change, you guys. It can be influenced. So that just goes to show that when whatever culture you live in, it's the overarching culture that influences you, and that trickles down to all the other systems that eventually come to you. It's like there's no way to escape this. It's going to impact you in some way, shape, and form. There's no way, unless you live on an isolated island where you're like the only person there, or you're the leader of that island and you dictate and control every aspect of that island, then there's no way you can say you're immune, man. You're not immune to being whitewashed. You're not immune. So I think I'm pretty much done, with this. I should leave that on the board so the next class who comes in here, they can see it and they're like, But I think that, it's really important that we look at this from a more accurate perspective and, not just how the media wants to do it. They just want you to zoom in and just focus on STEPHON Clark and his tweets and not look at the other aspects. None of us are immune. People like to think, oh, I make my own decisions. Nobody can influence me. You got to be a weak mind if you're influenced by the media. It's like, I need to have a talk one-on-one with you guys, and I can be able to show you how certain systems within our culture have influenced you and your makeup and how you are, and the way you talk, the way you think, down to every little choice that you've made in your life. No, this is not counseling, This is just me doing psychoeducation, educating you guys. You guys can hit the share button and pass it on to your friends and family because people need to see this. What we're talking about here is not a game, you guys. I think black women don't understand the gravity of this situation, the gravity of this issue. They're kind of glazing over it. And like I say, the media plays a major role in public opinion because you see this video that I'm making now to educate, how many people are tuning in. Facebook not going to promote this, but if I was talking about some ratchetness and trying to mislead the black community and break up the black community, everybody would be tuned in. I think, yes, Facebook does have control over how many people see your live videos. I've noticed the difference. Trust and believe. That's how the video that you see with this black woman saying that she's not going to offer her support to STEPHON Clark went viral. The people who control the algorithm of Facebook, they like stuff like that because it feeds into the narrative that the dominant culture wants to be perpetuated. I know a lot of y'all African Americans, y'all just think that the dominant culture is God. White people are God. And religion plays a major role in that. And giving y'all this white Jesus, so y'all have made this generalization to all people that, okay, if Jesus is white, then white people must be God. It's a subconscious thing. But let me go, you guys. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Go ahead and erase the board. But I thank you guys for watching, So Sometimes people want stuff quick. They want these videos to be 5 minutes. And no, you can't just explain this in 5 minutes. They want me to edit the videos and chop it up. And I'm like, no, I'm old school. But I like to sit down and have a discussion with you guys on topics like this. The reason why a lot of y'all are afraid to speak up because y'all have been conditioned not to. That's the reason why everybody going with the status quo of what white America wants you to think and how they want y'all to behave, because y'all are afraid. A lot of people are afraid to resist. You know, protesting is one thing. That's passive resistance. You get what I'm saying? Nobody really wants to really speak out and stand up and speak their mind on the truth, because people are afraid. People have been conditioned to be afraid of what white people gonna do. It's like it's an epigenetic thing, you know. It's something that's passed down through our genes through many generations, you know. Black people have been conditioned biologically, psychologically, you know, on how to think and behave. And black people know that they better stand in line, and they know that believing that narrative of mainstream media and following along with that, they know that's what the dominant culture wants them to do. They want them to fall in line. And that's what they choose to do. Anything to please white master. Y'all don't realize that's what they call post-traumatic slavery disorder. This thing is still alive and well, man. But I gotta go. I'm gonna catch you guys later. Love you guys. Bye.